Welcome to the Future Focused Learning Podcast, where we explore innovative ways to prepare students for the rapidly changing world of tomorrow. Join us as we chat with educators, industry experts, and thought leaders who are paving the way in STEM education and beyond. Let's dive in and discover how we can equip the next generation with the skills and knowledge they need to succeed. Hi everyone, it's your host Kyla Bolden. Thank you so much for joining us. Today on the podcast, we have Adam Rifkin, who is a very accomplished filmmaker, writer, and director. And he actually has a new movie coming out called Last Train of Fortune that highlights the importance of literature and discovering a love for reading. I was really excited to have Adam on the podcast for many reasons, but one of the reasons is because I think when we talk about future focused learning, future focused education, we typically go straight to the STEM and the tech subjects, which I think are, of course, really, really important. But I would argue that literacy is just as important. Literacy scores are not the best in North America, and it's super important that we encourage our students and our children to have a love for reading, as I think that's really the foundation of education in general, right? So I'm really excited for you guys to listen to this podcast. We talk a lot about his career as a filmmaker and how he got started, how his love for literature played into that. And he also gives some advice on helping students and helping yourself even develop a love for reading. So I hope you guys enjoy the episode. I really enjoyed speaking with Adam, and let's get into it. So, Adam, thank you so much for joining us on the Future Focused Learning podcast. I'm really excited to speak with you because most of the time we're speaking with individuals who are either in the education space or in the tech space. But I was really interested in speaking with you because you do have an upcoming film coming up, which we're definitely going to get into, which focus on the importance of reading. And oftentimes when we're thinking about future focused learning, sometimes reading and like literature is not as well thought of because it is a very traditional form of education. But I would argue right now with the way literacy rates are going and just like the constant need for better communication, it's more important than ever. So super happy to have you on the podcast. First, I want to start off with how you got into filmmaking.
Well, thank you for inviting me to be on the podcast. I'm very excited to talk to you and your listeners about education and how the film that we will talk about momentarily hopefully inspires education and inspires reading. But how I got started in filmmaking. Well, I'm from Chicago, and I grew up loving movies from as early an age as I can remember. And all I ever wanted to do was make movies when I grew up as my adult job. And I didn't understand when I was 5, 6, 7 years old what a director was or a producer was. I didn't even know films were written. I just knew somebody made them in some weird land called Hollywood. And someday I was going to be old enough to move there and pursue learning how to make them myself for real. But in the meantime, I spent my childhood making little movies with my friends using my dad's Super 8 camera. And without realizing it, teaching myself the basics of how movies were made by trial and error. So by the time I moved out to LA, when I was 17 when I left Chicago to come to LA, I realized when I got to film school that I kind of by default had learned a bunch of these fundamentals of how you structure a scene, how you shoot the various shots, what you need to tell the story visually. And then I started writing scripts and trying to knock on doors. I learned very early on, I kind of figured out that the only magic to getting a movie made was having the money to make it with. There was no other alchemy necessary. If you have the money to make a movie, you can make a movie. So I wrote some scripts and I started knocking on doors trying to find money. And I got very lucky when I was very young, and I ended up making my first movie when I was 20, and that's how I got started.
Oh, wow. And could you tell us a little bit about your first movie that you made?
My first movie was called Never on Tuesday. I had met a young producer named Brad Wyman, who also produced my current film and many of my other films in between. And he was working for an old time producer named Elliot Kastner.
Mhm.
And Brad had loved a script I had written called The Dark Backward, which we ultimately made a few years later. But he tried to get Elliot to fund it, and Elliot had no interest. He said it was too weird, and he wanted a movie that would appeal to the kids, meaning teens. So he said, do you have any scripts for the kids? I said, oh yeah, I have one for the kids. He said, well, bring it in tomorrow. I said, well, can I polish it up a little bit? What if I bring it in on Monday? And this was like on a Wednesday. He said, sure, bring it in on Monday. So I ran home and I wrote a script for the kids, for teenagers, over the next few days. And I brought it in on Monday. He didn't even read it. He just said to Brad, will the kids like it? And Brad's like, kids will love it, Elliot. And Elliot's like, okay, we'll make it. And that's how I got my first movie made. And it was and Brad was the one who said, if you could write something that's 3 characters, 1 location, I bet I could get Elliot to fund it. And that's what happened. So it's about 2 boys driving to California from Ohio to move to Los Angeles, and a woman driving from Los Angeles to New York. And in the middle of the desert, they crash their cars and are stuck out there. And the 3 of them are waiting for help and getting to know each other while they're waiting for help. And it's a little bit like Breakfast Club meets Waiting for Godot. So that's my first movie.
Oh, I love that. And I love that was it a director or a producer that was willing to take a chance on you? I don't know the right terminology.
Producer.
Producer, yeah. I love that they were willing to take a chance on you. And I thought it was very interesting that you were like, okay, let me go home and write this. I think entrepreneurship is very much like that too. You're trying to get like your first break and you have somebody that's like, okay, yeah, if you do if you have this product, yeah, we could buy that. And then you go home and be like, build it. And you really tell them, okay, I have it.
If there's an opportunity available to you and it's within your grasp and you don't reach out for it, it's on you. It's your own fault. You have to try. And so that's what I did.
Absolutely. One of the things you talked about is that you always wanted to be a filmmaker. Like this is something that you wanted to do from a child. And I really love that because something that we try to do at my company with Kit Learning is we're always looking for ways that we can help students take what they're innately interested in and turn that into a career. Because oftentimes you go through the education system and you're told, okay, these things that you're interested in as a child is not something that's like realistic per se, right? But I think you could learn a lot from who you are as a child in what you're actually passionate about and what your purpose is. So I absolutely love that you were able to take something that was like a dream of yours and able to like stay focused and turn it into reality. For me, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Like when my friends would come over the house, I'll be like, we need to play business. Like that was my my version of playtime.
I love
Definitely
it.
annoyed some of my friends. But that was like the coolest thing to me. And I didn't originally go into entrepreneurship, or I guess I did, but I didn't think I was gonna do it right after university, but I ended up doing it, which was great, and it felt really innately interesting to me and just felt like at home. I want to talk a little bit about your movie, Last Train to Fortune. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Last Train to Fortune is a Western. It's set in the post-Civil War American Southwest, 1870s-ish. And it's about an old British school teacher who is traveling across America on his way to a little tiny frontier town called Fortune, where he's been hired to be the new schoolmaster. But we open the movie on a train platform in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere, and learn that he's missed the last train to Fortune, which is the final leg of his journey to get to the town he's on his way to. And as he's trying to figure out how he's going to get there, because it's like a 2-day ride by horseback if he missed the train, and he doesn't have a horse, he doesn't know what he's going to do. He's held up on the train platform by a very scary outlaw, and um, the outlaw steals all his money and his belongings. But because he's desperate, the school teacher, whose name is Cecil convinces the outlaw named Dooley uh, that instead of just riding off with the money that you stole out of my pockets, I need to be in Fortune by first thing Monday morning. And I have an entire month's teacher's stipend waiting for me, my first month's pay. And if you ride me there on your horse, I'll give it to you. So for a 2-day ride, you get a month's pay. And the outlaw is convinced to take him on the journey. And the two of them go on this adventure together on their way across the plains. And Cecil, we learn, is very educated and passionate about books and the characters and the authors he almost describes like they're his friends or his family. But all the adventures he's ever lived in his life are in the pages of these books that he's been reading his whole life. Dooley, on the other hand, is illiterate, but he's actually lived a life of real adventure. And so the two of them are unsurprisingly opposites of one another as they set out on this journey, and they get involved in a lot of obstacles and adventures along the way, and form a uncommon bond as they sort of learn from one another, and hopefully along the way, Cecil can inspire Dooley to see the value and the importance of being educated, because Dooley's on a bit of a self-destructive path. Cecil realizes this pretty quickly and tries to help inspire him that if he can be educated, a whole host of other opportunities may open up for him in his future. And that's kind of what the movie's about. But it's a lot of fun, hopefully, and it's very exciting, and we got a great cast. And I've always wanted to make a Western, so it was really a dream come true to make it. And I will say, as well, very importantly, it was written by my mother, who is, she's still with us, of course, is a lifelong teacher. And her passion for books and her passion for learning are baked into the heart and soul of the text. And so it felt very good making this movie as a tribute to my mother, who instilled the love of books and education in me growing up.
And I was just about to ask a little bit about your mother because I know as you said, she authored this script. What inspired her to write this, as well as what inspired you to bring it to life so many years later?
So my mother, although she was a teacher her whole life, always aspired to be a writer. And so when I was a kid, she was writing children's television in Chicago, local children's television. And then I moved out to LA when I was 17, like I said. And then a year later or so, my mother moved out to LA to pursue her writing, along with my sister, who at the time was in high school. And my mother got into the Saturday morning cartoon business. She was writing Saturday morning cartoons for Disney and Nickelodeon and Hanna-Barbera. She wrote Winnie the Pooh cartoons. She wrote Smurf cartoons, but she was always pursuing writing movies as well. And so this particular script came about because she entered a PBS screenwriting competition. They were looking for the great American Western that they could produce. And so she decided to incorporate her two loves into this screenplay, her love of teaching and learning and education, and her love of Westerns, because growing up, she always wanted to be a cowgirl. So she wrote this script in 1986, and it technically won the contest because they said they loved hers the best, and she was technically the winner, but it was too expensive for them to produce. So it didn't get produced at the time. The way it ultimately got made and what inspired me to want to be a part of it. First of all, when I first read the script, I loved it. It spoke to me. The being in, reading a great Western is always fun because I love the genre, but also my mother's passion for education and learning and books came through in the script, and I found that to be very inspiring. So in 1992-ish, I had made a film with Brad Wyman, same producer, called The Dark Backward, which starred an actor named Bill Paxton, the great Bill Paxton. Brad had also produced a movie simultaneously around the same time, starring Malcolm McDowell, the legendary actor Malcolm McDowell. And we all became friends. Brad and me and the Paxton family and the McDowell family. And Bill and Malcolm wanted to do a movie together. And so I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was my mother said, Last Train to Fortune stars an old British school teacher and a young cowboy, perfect for Malcolm and Bill. So Malcolm then said, why don't I give it to my friend Lindsay Anderson? He directed Malcolm in his very first film called If. And that's the role that got him the role in A Clockwork Orange, which made him a superstar. But Lindsay Anderson, legendary British director, who also had a love affair with American Westerns. He absolutely was passionate about the director, John Ford. And so he read the script and loved it, and he was going to direct it. And I was going to be one of the producers with Brad on it. And Lindsay and Malcolm being reteamed together after making several movies in England together was exciting for me as a film lover. But sadly, just as we were starting to put the pieces together, Lindsay died. He was older and he passed away. So we thought the movie was dead. But little by little throughout the years, we would talk about bringing it back to life again, and I would step in as the director. Then in 2017, sadly, Bill Paxton passed away. And so we thought for sure the film was dead at that point. But a few years later after that, Brad and I drove up to Ojai, which is where the Paxtons and the McDowells live. And we all had lunch with Malcolm and Bill's son, James Paxton, who's a very talented young actor. And one thing led to another. And it might have been Malcolm who said, why don't we do Last Train to Fortune now? And James Paxton can play the role his father was going to play. And we all just thought that was such a great idea. And Brad said, I'm on it. And somehow, for whatever reason, the planets aligned really quickly and the movie came together and we made it. And here we are now.
I love that story. And how long did it actually take you to make the movie? Like the
Well,
filming aspect of it?
it's a very tight schedule
Hmm.
because it's a very ambitious movie. It's a period piece, first of all, which is very expensive, and a Western, all the animals and all the set dressing, and we needed an old Western town. So, we wanted it to look like a big movie, but we really didn't have a lot of time. So it took us about 3 weeks to shoot the initial movie, and then a couple days of pickup shots here and there. So that's roughly how long it took to shoot.
From being able to watch the movie, I absolutely loved it. One of the things that I was surprised with is at times I was laughing. A lot of it I was laughing. And then other times I found myself crying. It was very touching. It really took you through a very, very important story. And one of the biggest things I took from it was the impact books could have on individuals, especially the main character, and also the importance of making literature not just something that you do in school, but a part of your life and the way you see the world. I was actually an English major, even though I'm in tech now. I went to university and English was my major. And one of the reasons why I decided English is because I wanted to learn about the world through a variety of perspectives. I went to Tufts. I started off as a political science major, and then and then I found out that I had to take 4 years of a language, and then I was like, that's a lot of Spanish every semester. I don't know if I want to do that, especially somebody who struggled with languages a bit. And then I went into econ, and then I just wasn't as interested because it didn't have that like humanities perspective that you got a little bit in political science. And then I also felt like I was only learning about like the economy through one perspective, right? And then I was teetering between going into history or English. And one of the reasons why I decided to go into English is because I felt like it had the best of both worlds in which you were learning about the world, but you were learning about it from so many different perspectives. And it's very interesting how even the older books like I think it's Tristram Shandy. I forget the author of it. It's like this 18th century novel that talks about how you view the world and how sometimes the way you view the world is through like the traumas that you had, and it's actually kind of like a comedy as well too. Even those older books it really, really change the way you look at the world, and you can actually see how other people from other places actually look at the world. So I'm definitely a huge proponent of reading and making sure that literature is embedded embedded into everyone's education, really. But this film talks a lot about the importance of literature. Could you talk a little bit more about that conversation and maybe your mother's thoughts on it and what you want people to get out of the film?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for saying those lovely things about the movie. That is a philosophy I've always subscribed to, which is that it's much more easy to cry with a character if you've already laughed with the character. And so that was very important to me going in. If we're going to love these characters and we're going to be rooting for them along the way, I think we should laugh with them and cry with them, as one does in life. It's true to life that way. You know, we have ups and downs in life. Um, one of the things that was always very important to my mother, and she instilled in me and my sister, is that reading is not just intended for homework. Reading is an opportunity to visit other times, other places. You can disappear into these worlds in these pages of books that can be so thrilling and so inspiring and change your perspective on everything you see, everything you hear, and how important education is for all of us, not just when you're in school, but a constant curiosity, a constant love of learning. And so that was very inspiring to me, and I know my sister as well. And my sister also now is a teacher and an author. So learning these lessons from my mother growing up, and learning to respect and understand the value of education beyond just what is required in school, but beyond that, just this thirst for knowledge and how it can change your whole perspective on all of life. I really wanted to make sure that came through clearly in the movie, but didn't feel like it was hitting you over the head. It's important, first and foremost, to me as a filmmaker, that the movie is entertaining. I want people to love the movie because they were entertained by the ride. I also want them to be inspired by the characters and inspired by the themes. And ultimately, when they walk away, the best case scenario is exactly what you said. I laughed, I cried, and I thought about the value of education. That is the key to this movie's success, is people feeling exactly what you just said about the movie. So thank you again.
You're welcome. Yeah, I felt so privileged that I was able to watch it beforehand. And something that you brought up about, being a lifelong learner. One of the things that I noticed when you're in elementary school, fiction is all ultimately like incorporated into a lot of the subjects that you read, even in a lot of like even the play that you do. So there's these things, I'm not sure if you heard of them, American Girl dolls. A lot of, yeah, okay, good. Of course, yeah. And but even
Kitteridge.
yes, yes, yes. So but like those dolls are like historical and you get to learn about
Yeah.
history and life and other people's perspective through playing. And then ultimately, I find what happens is when you move up the ranks from middle school, high school, they start taking a lot of the stories, like those accounts of somebody's life out of education and it becomes less entertaining. And I would
Yeah.
say even for me, whether it was in like the field of like I was taking a psychology class or a history class, I learned even more about psychology through reading sometimes like fictional novels. And I learned even deeper understanding of history through reading books about people going through journeys and their perspectives and their downfalls and their triumphs. I was able to retain that information a lot more and understand it by actually reading. So I think that's super important. And I want to ask you about your love for reading and if there's any books that you found profoundly impacted you on your journey, whether it's as a person or filmmaker. Yeah.
Yes, there are many books that have a tremendous impact on me. My personal favorite book, and it's tough, it's like, what's your favorite movie? I love so many movies, but if I had to point to one book that to me is the most impactful, it's Moby Dick. Moby Dick is such a great allegory for all aspects of life, and the man against nature and man's obsession with conquering nature, and it's everything about Moby Dick I find moving and inspiring and exciting and thought provoking. But I will say this, Cecil's uh, carrying with him across the Old West a satchel of books that are his most prized possessions. And all the books that are mentioned in the movie, we start with Homer's Odyssey. We go on to list Gulliver's Travels and the books by the Bronte sisters and Jane Austen and Shakespeare and so many others. We have a list compiled of all a reading list of all the books from the movie. And I would love for people, before they see the movie, after they see the movie, whenever, I'd love for them to check out that list, because there are so many different types of stories, different writers, different perspectives that you can glean from this list. And I would say to anybody who's curious, just start reading one. You'll see it's not homework. These books are fascinating. They're entertaining. They're funny. They're scary. They're sad. And like you said, you have such an opportunity through fiction. I love all kinds of books, don't get me wrong, but fiction gives you an opportunity to get inside the characters' minds. You know, you can get really deep, a deep dive into the psychology of the character, their perspective on the world, their perspective on life, and it really can help inspire you as the reader to think differently about certain things, or to reaffirm things you've already felt, or to reject something that you don't agree with, or whatever. But fiction does give you this unique opportunity to really, really get granular in the way people think and their philosophies on things. And I find that fascinating.
And I would just going off of that, I think many people are scared to read books like that. For whatever reason, you pick up the Odyssey and you think, oh, I have to be some like crazy, crazy intellectual person, which I feel like most of like everyone is in some way, but you might feel intimidated to read these books. And what I would say is just give it a try, right? Because they end up being super entertaining when you're going into them with an open mind. And you'll be surprised. Even some of these books obviously were written so long ago. They have real world lessons and modern lessons that you could take from them. Out of that list, what would you think would be the first one people should start with?
That is a great question, because I think they're all so unique and valuable in their own ways.
And it probably depends on the person.
It definitely depends on the person. So what I'm going to say is, rather than say what I think should be the first book, I would say look at the list. It's a look at the list, and whatever title jumps out at you, whether it's because you've heard about it before, whether because you've heard it referenced in a movie or a cartoon, or somebody you know mentioned it, or just pick it up, give the first few pages a read. I think people are afraid that, you know, we're all kind of conditioned to believe that reading classics is homework, and it's not. There's one of life's great joys is reading, and these classics are classics for a reason. And yes, maybe in your everyday life you don't speak or receive information in Shakespearean ease, you know what I mean, in Shakespearean language, or you think Homer was written thousands of years ago. What could I possibly glean from something that was written thousands of years ago? And what you realize the more you read is that human beings have always been the same. We all have the same wants, the same desires, the same dreams, the same fears. And it's just all these different ways, all these different authors and all these different characters have different ways of expressing these things. And when they're good, when these works are good, which these classics of course always are, it doesn't matter what year they were written in. It doesn't matter what year they're set in. They will speak to you, whether it's Dickens or whether it's Jane Austen or whether it's Shakespeare.
And one of the things I would say is if you read one of these books in school, which you probably have at least read one of them in school, still read them again, because reading a book that's not for homework is a very different experience than
Absolutely.
actually, sitting down and reading it. And I know when I was a teenager, a lot of the like rom-coms that were coming out were taken from Shakespeare plays, right? So, and that's, I mean, you probably even know it better than I do, but there are so many movies that are taken from these classics, right? And to be able to read the classic and then be able to watch the movie and be like, oh, like this is how it relates to that, or they pulled this from this.
Exactly.
It's so fun. It makes life so much better. And these contents that we're consuming, it just makes it so much more rich. So I would really
If
encourage everyone.
I agree with you. You know what? I'll say this. If I had to point to one book that maybe is on the list that people, if they can't figure out which one to pick first, I'll just say pick up Oliver Twist. I think everybody's heard of Oliver, right? Everybody's heard of Oliver Twist.
Mhm.
But that book, and everybody thinks they know maybe a little something about Oliver Twist, please, sir, can I have some more? Everybody knows that, right? But Oliver Twist gets so dark and
Mhm.
so scary. There, people don't think, oh, well, it was written in the, hundreds hundreds of years ago. How could it be scary? It's scarier than anything you've experienced today. The harrowing things that young Oliver has to go through. It's fascinating. So I would say if one of the other titles doesn't jump out at you first and you're trying to figure out which one to pick up first, pick up Oliver Twist. You will not go wrong with Oliver Twist.
Oh, that's I love that. I love that. I grew up in Bermuda and I went to a British school. So Oliver Twist, we didn't read the book, but we actually we might have. I'm not sure, but I know we watched the movie multiple times. It's like a big part of, I don't know, our education. I feel like I watched it in many different grades. And I'm definitely gonna reread the book now. But
Are you
I
talking
love
about the musical movie, the
the
version that's the
musical.
musical? I love that movie. There's several versions of Oliver Twist made into films, and
Oh
they're all
wow.
pretty good in their own ways. The musical I loved as a kid growing up. There was a version of Oliver Twist from before that. It's an older film, a black and white film,
Hmm.
really good. And then there's one that came out not too terribly long ago, probably about 15 years ago or so, I'm guessing, where Ben Kingsley played Fagin. That was a really pretty good one too. They're all pretty good. The musical though is fabulous. I love it. I've watched it a million times.
Yeah, I love it too. And I don't know if kids still watch it in school because I was talking to, maybe they don't. I was talking to my cousin and I was quoting the musical and the songs because I'm like, of course, everyone knows it. And they were like, what? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, but definitely read the book. But one of the big things that we try to answer on this podcast is how can we prepare students for the future? You know, the world is changing so much. This is definitely even just in the past 4 years going through the pandemic and, you know, the economy. I could list off all the things, but it's not 2019 anymore. It's definitely not 2010 anymore. The world has changed so much. And something that we as educators are always trying to think about is what are the skills that students need for the future in order to be successful, to be happy, to be able to pursue careers that they want to pursue. Now, sometimes we talk about it, we talk about like tech skills as well too. But I would argue that the soft skills, especially now with like the advent of AI and et cetera, is becoming more important than ever, really. And one of the things that I love about your movie is it focuses on the necessity of literature and reading and incorporating it into your real life. How do you think a love for learning, a love for literature could help students and just individuals in general prepare to be successful in the future?
Well, I think it goes back to the sort of um, passion for curiosity. So if you're a curious person, you're not going to be satisfied just with whatever you're spoon fed. You're going to want to know more. You're going to want to learn more. And it's the process of learning how to learn that ultimately, I believe, opens up the most doors for you, in life, whatever chosen field you're pursuing, right? So if you, a lot of people just are not in the habit of reading right now, because culturally, it's just not what people are always doing all the time anymore. People have so many ways to entertain themselves that are instant gratification and or quick snippets or very short micro blog posts or whatever they are, that if you can slow it down and start to get into the habit of reading. Reading is a muscle you have to work out. Once the more you read, the more you enjoy reading and the more you crave reading. And to the point where when you start reading books that you like, by the time you're reaching the end of the book, you don't want that world to end. You're sad the book is ending, right? You may start the book saying, how am I going to read a 500-page book? And then by the time you're at page 498, you're thinking, I don't want it to end. So I would say just embrace learning how to learn, embrace the joy of learning. And that, I would say, in my opinion, the best way to do that is to read and to get good at reading, because the more you read, the better you'll get at it and the more you'll enjoy it. And the more you read, the more your mind is open to other perspectives, other points of view, other philosophies that you may completely disagree with, but you will enjoy learning the other points of view, and then you can formulate maybe different points of view than what you learned, or maybe you'll be influenced by the point of view you learned. Whatever it is, I would say just turn off the devices a little bit, every once in a while, sit down in a quiet environment, no distractions, and just enjoy getting absorbed in these books, because the more you do it, the more rewarding it will be in all aspects of your life.
Absolutely, I agree. It definitely reading a book really helps you learn, I would say exactly what you're saying, because when you read a book, especially a fiction book, it's not like you're reading it's just what you're reading on the page is what you're reading on the page. You are looking at what the story's about, you're questioning the characters. Even after you read the book, you're saying, okay, is this true what the character feels? Should they feel that way? There's so many different theses and hypotheses you could take from every story that you read, and it does do a very good job at teaching you how to learn. And one
Yeah.
of the things that we know for sure is with how much the world is changing, everyone is going to have to keep on learning. No,
Yeah.
I mean, and this hasn't happened for years. You don't go to even universities or get your master's and then you know everything you need to know for a career. Most of us will have multiple careers. Most of us will have to upskill, learn, try new things. And reading is one of the best ways to keep yourself learning and keep yourself in the muscle of, like learning and understanding new perspectives and all of those things. So I really, really love that. I think reading, a lot of people don't read a book after they graduate university, which is crazy to think, but that's most people. But I think especially as well when it comes to attention span and devices and etc., a lot of people find it hard to sit down and watch a TV show and not have their phone out and scroll at the same time, which
Yeah.
is blows my mind that we've gotten to that point.
Yeah.
But reading also helps you focus on one thing. It's extremely calming too.
I would say
Okay.
people who are not in the habit of reading,
Hmm.
right, and don't even know how to start getting into it, I would say sit down, turn your phone off, and just read a couple
Hmm.
pages, and just make it an appointment for yourself. Every day you're going to read a couple more pages, and then I guarantee you're going to start wanting to read more than a couple pages after a few days, and then you're going to be reading. Okay, I'll read the rest of this chapter, and then the next time you sit down, you say, okay, I'm going to read the whole next chapter, and then at a certain point, you're not thinking about page numbers. You're not thinking about how far into the book you are. You're just wrapped up in the story. You're engaged with these characters. You're vested in these characters. That's why these things are called page turners. You can't stop turning the pages because you're so vested in what's happening next. And then the idea of sitting down to read as homework is out the window. Now you realize what the joy of reading is all about. So just take it
Absolutely.
slow, a couple pages at a time, and I think people will get into it.
You will grow to love it. You just have to be committed at first,
Yeah.
especially if you're not used to
Yeah.
sitting down and reading a novel. The last question that I would ask you is this movie, what do you hope people take from it?
Well, first and foremost, I want people to be entertained by it. And like you
Mhm.
said, I want people to laugh, I want people to cry, and I want people to be inspired by the idea that education sets us free. It opens up all the doors for us. And if we remain closed-minded to enriching our brains, we're only cheating ourselves. But in doing so, and if everybody is doing that, we're cheating our culture as a whole. I think it's very I think people will enjoy the movie whether they absorb that theme or not. I think the movie hopefully is funny and touching, and the adventure is exciting enough that at the very minimum, I hope people enjoy it as a movie. But I do feel that if you keep your mind and your heart open to what Cecil has to say about why education is wonderful, I hope that people will take away a little bit of curiosity about, well, maybe I should pick up one of these classics. I haven't read a Shakespeare play, or I haven't read a Dickens book. Let's give it a shot and see. I just hope that starts the conversation going.
I love that. I love that. And from watching the movie myself, I could definitely say that it made me want to, put down some of my devices and dive back into the classics as well too, because, I think as we said before, those are what a lot of the great stories of the modern times are derived from. And then also they're just so interesting to read. So thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. When can people expect the movie to come out?
The movie is coming out later this year. We don't know the exact date yet, but keep an eye out. You will hear about it. It will be coming to your town we're going to do a unique release for Last Train to Fortune. Instead of just opening it in as many theaters as possible for a couple of weeks and then it disappears and appears somewhere else on a streaming platform, we're going to do what's called an old-fashioned roadshow. This is something they used to do in Hollywood in the old days, where you roll into town. We're going to roll in with our bookmobile in the shape of a train, and we're going to have tons of books to give away. We're going to do events at libraries and schools and museums. We're going to screen the movie. We're going to be there to do Q&As with the people, with the students who are there and anyone else who's there. And we're going to sign people up for library cards, and we're going to really get everybody on that last train vibe of wanting to learn and read and have fun with it and enjoy the movie at the same time.
Wow, that's so exciting. So I cannot wait till it comes out to everyone. And thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I really appreciate the story that you were able to share with us. And I'm excited for everyone to be able to watch the movie.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for all the kind words, and to all your listeners, thank you for listening.
So, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Please make sure to subscribe to Future Focused Learning on wherever you're watching or listening to this, and give us a 5-star review, and tell us who you would like to see on the podcast next, or what topics you would like us to speak about. Thank you so much again for listening, and I hope you have a terrific week.